Hi, I'm Christy and welcome to Prayerful Flow. I'll take a few moments to let you know what to expect. To access today's class today, I would invite you to have a block or two or like a firm bolster or a thick hardbound book, maybe even wrapped in a towel. Again, these are not required, but options to help you deepen your experience. I also invite you to set up your mat or even just have nearby some free wall space or a place that is near like large flat furniture, because we'll be using that as an assist for part of our practice. So just taking a moment to get that ready, and then to access or to begin coming into our breath before we listen to our scripture reading, I invite you to do one of two things. So we're going to be taking bound angle pose. So you can be doing this from a seated posture or lying down. So if you would like to take it in the seated posture, you're going to be sitting tall, moving the flesh away from your sits bones, bringing the soles of your feet together and your knees wide. And perhaps since it's early in the practice, you're going to be extending your feet out a little bit. So like it's a longer diamond rather than having the soles of your feet close to your inner groin. So that is an option for you. And if you are in the seated position, I invite you to sit tall, feeling the length of your spine and rolling your shoulders maybe a few times on your back body. Another option, if you have two blocks, would be to place the blocks underneath your knees to make it more of a restorative or supported pose, still getting the same benefits. So that would be an option. And if you are just feeling like you need some grounding and some restoration and some relaxation, you can go ahead and take this whole posture and lay on your back. So keeping the integrity of your legs, keeping that same posture, you can lie on your back and still get the benefits of kind of just this slow and passive hip opener. So taking a moment to settle into whichever version of bound angle pose you would like to take, and just letting yourself kind of quiet and settle into your posture, into your practice, into your prayer, bringing your awareness to your breath. Letting your inhale be long and slow and easy. And same with your exhale, just slowly breathing out. No rush, no forcing. Just letting your breath flow naturally. And then as you lie there or sit here, finding stillness, enjoying your breath, I invite you to bring your awareness to God's presence, knowing that God is in all things, above all things, before all things, and ever present, and does not separate from us, but also does not force a relationship with us, force himself upon us. We intentionally invite him into our prayer and our practice. So we're going to begin transitioning to our reading. Our passage today comes from Mark 6. I'm going to give you a few points to kind of listen for as we read. So with the Gospel of Mark, I've been saying the past few weeks, taking time to notice what the masses or what the crowd does and what Jesus does. So Gospel of action, kind of just noticing what the people are doing versus what Jesus is doing or saying. So another thing I invite you, normally I say if a word or phrase is catching your attention, today I invite you to notice how you feel with the passage. So notice if a feeling is coming up, and whether that is like your own personal feeling or whether you're feeling something for another, whether it's feeling about the crowd or feeling about Jesus or feeling for Jesus. And just kind of notice that feeling. Don't try to change it. Don't try to explain why it's there. Just notice it, see if you can name it, and see if you can just kind of be still and be present with that for our reading. So I'm going to read the passage twice. Taking a long deep breath in through your nose and sighing it out through your mouth, preparing yourself to listen. Jesus departed from there and came to his native place, accompanied by his disciples. When the Sabbath came, he began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were astonished. They said, "Where did this man get all this? What kind of wisdom has been given him? What mighty deeds are wrought by his hands? Is he not the carpenter, the son of Mary, and the brother of James and Joseph and Judas and Simon? And are not his sisters here with us?" And they took offense at him. And Jesus said, "A prophet is not without honor except in his native place, and among his own kin, and in his own house." So he was not able to perform any mighty deed there, apart from curing a few sick people and laying his hands on them. He was amazed at their lack of faith. Take a few rounds of breath, just letting any ideas or feelings that came up for you or that are coming up now, allowing them to settle, observing them without judgment or trying to change them. We'll read that passage one more time. So again, listening, staying with any feeling that comes up, naming the feeling perhaps, and just holding space for that emotion. Jesus departed from there and came to his native place, accompanied by his disciples. When the Sabbath came, he began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were astonished. They said, "Where did this man get all this? What kind of wisdom has been given him? What mighty deeds are wrought by his hands? Is he not the carpenter, the son of Mary, and the brother of James and Joseph and Judas and Simon? And are not his sisters here with us?" And they took offense at him. Jesus said to them, "A prophet is not without honor except in his native place and among his own kin and in his own house." So he was not able to perform any mighty deed there, apart from curing a few sick people and laying his hands on them. He was amazed at their lack of faith. Take a few moments to notice what came up for you, perhaps naming a feeling, and offering it up in prayer as a prayer of gratitude, as a prayer of praise, as a prayer of questioning or petition, or just maybe even simply an expression of being present with Jesus. And then when you're ready, begin to slowly draw your knees together, whether you're seated on the floor or laying on your back. And perhaps bringing your knees together, your feet, the soles of your feet on the floor, maybe just gently windshield wipering your knees from side to side, beginning to make slow, fluid movements. And then I invite you to take a moment. I'm going to give you two kind of warm-up options that you may rely on them or bring them into practice later. We're going to be working a lot with our hips during this practice as we transition to movement. So first option, of course, you can try both, but first one, if you're not already on your back, I invite you to come there, meet on our backs. And again, if your knees are bent and the soles of your feet are on the floor, you can leave them there. And I first invite you to just extend your right leg long to the sky, the sole of your foot almost like you're painting on the ceiling, with continuing to leave your left knee bent. So stretching, stretching, stretching your right leg long, bending your knee, crossing your right ankle above your left knee. So letting it rest on the top of your thigh. So kind of coming into a supported, reclined pigeon. And just notice what you notice. Make sure you flex your right foot, keeping it active, protecting your knee. Maybe inviting your right hand on your right knee to deepen the stretch. And just notice how this feels for you. Option 2, adjust the posture by kind of inching your left foot towards your sits bones. And maybe even raising your left foot off the ground, if that feels like that's calling to you. Again, it's early in practice, so just taking note of what feels helpful and restorative and kind of relieving to you. Take a couple more rounds of breath here before extending your right leg long, stretching it back to the sky, bending your right knee, placing your right foot on the floor, and switching legs, extending your left leg long now. And again, stretching first, like you're extending, like you can really paint, use the sole of your foot to paint the ceiling. Feeling that lengthening and that stretching before bending your left knee, crossing your left ankle over your right knee, letting it land above your left or right knee on your left thigh, and keeping your, or on your right thigh, sorry for that, keeping your left foot flexed. Noticing if your left knee tried to hike up, using your left hand to gently press and invite it back towards center. And again, maybe drawing your right foot closer to your sits bones to deepen the stretch. In many of us, one hip might be tighter than the other, so just notice if this side feels any different. Make any adjustments. And again, maybe option to raise your right foot to deepen the stretch yet a little bit more. So when we say the word hip opener in yoga, it's kind of complicated because it sounds like, we're opening our hip. Like, where are we opening it? So your hip is a ball and socket joint, and it has a wide range of mobility. And by all the things our legs do to support our upper body, like sitting, walking, running, any of that, our hips can get very tight, especially if we have a desk job. So when we do hip openers, we're doing different stretches, holding position stretches for long periods of time, breathing through them to kind of add flexibility or range of motion. So that is what we're going to be working on today. So if your right foot is extended, go ahead and return your right foot to the ground. Extend your left leg one more time. Maybe point and flex your foot. And then return your left foot to meet your right. And again, option 2, hug your knees into chest or windshield wiper your knees if that feels like that's something you need. And then when you're ready, I invite you to make your way over to a wall or whichever object you're using to kind of extend your legs on the wall. Using the wall as one of our guides for instruction. So I'm going to be using this piece of furniture, but kind of coming into that same posture we were just in. So your knees are bent Your soles of your feet are on the floor, or you can begin by putting your legs up the wall if you want to do that. So either way. So if wherever you are, I invite you to bend your right knee. You might have to kind of wiggle your sits bones up towards the object a little bit more. So you're bending your right knee and placing your leg parallel to the wall. So from your knee to your ankle, that will be going up against the wall or object. So like you're coming into a seated pose on the wall. So your sits bones are towards the wall or towards the object. Your right foot is flexed. Your knee is bent. So then again, extend your left leg long, just kind of like we just did. And then you're going to bend your left knee. Place your left ankle just above your right knee. So like you're crossing your legs. So coming into this mini wall supported reclined double pigeon or fire log pose. So this might be really intense on your hips, and you might notice a big space between your right heel and your left knee. That is okay. We are taking a self-assessment just to kind of check and see where we are as a baseline for this practice. So if this is really intense for you, I invite you to return to that supine pigeon or reclined pigeon pose that we just did before we came over to the wall. So this is just a place, an option for you to check in. And you are always making sure that top foot remains flexed. So your left foot right now is still flexed. And you're breathing. You can place your left hand on your knee, noticing if gently guiding, if your knee is kind of hiked up like mine is. Obviously we're moving. The goal of the pose is eventually to soften and move your right knee or your left knee closer to your right ankle. So you can place your left hand on your left knee and gently guiding it with your breath, but you're not pressing, you're not like forcing it. You are just letting it soften, allowing your breath to transform the pose for you. Notice what you notice. So take a couple more rounds of breath here. And then when you're ready to gently release the pose by extending your left leg long, maybe placing it on the wall, straightening your right leg, maybe placing that on the wall, maybe even like shaking your legs out a little bit before doing another check-in. Just baseline fire log pose on the opposite side, using the wall. So making any adjustments you need, maybe bringing your sits bones closer to the wall. So this time bending your left knee, placing it on the bottom. So again, your leg from your knee to your ankle is parallel with the wall. Extending your right leg long before bending your right knee, placing your right ankle above your left knee, keeping your right foot flexed, maybe placing your right hand on your right knee, and just using your breath to let the pose evolve, kind of softening into the pose. So bringing to mind our gospel passage, we deal with, or we see, Jesus has to deal with the difficulty of rejection and not being included, not being welcomed, just hard things. And that's where we see that, even God isn't removed from the hard experiences or the harsh experiences that we can experience in our lives and on our journey.
So these are the kind of passages that, rather than avoiding, we kind of slow down the pace, take our time to digest, take our time to process, lean into them in order to understand what we can learn from them, or what that might mean in our lives, or how the Holy Spirit is working in our lives. So when you're ready, take a long inhale in, slowly exhale, maybe sighing it out your mouth. Begin to unwind the pose very gently, extending your legs up the wall. Maybe shaking your legs out, maybe just taking a really long stretch, enjoying the length of your legs up the wall for a moment, maybe pointing and flexing your feet. So these are two really good options. As we get into more advanced hip openers through the practice, these are two options that you can take if for a more passive, more reclined, more restful posture. So options for you to use later on in practice if you'd like. So when you're ready, go ahead and find your way back to your mat. We'll meet in a hands and knees pose. Coming into hands and knees, just checking in, looking to see if our hips are over our knees, our shoulders are over our elbows, are over our wrists, and our toes can be flat or our feet can be flexed, whatever we need in this moment. Let's take a few rounds of cat and cow rotations with our breath to just bring some different movement, some more fluid movement into our practice. Cat pose, we're curling our spine, pressing into the mat. Our shoulders are arching and moving away from the mat towards the ceiling. Our neck is loose and fluid and relaxed. We can shake our head out, yes and no, releasing any tension we carry in our neck, shoulders, and even our jaw. On our inhale, our belly drops, our heart lifts, our shoulders drop back, our gaze is up. Cow pose. And moving the pace of your own breath, your own inhalation and exhalation through cat and cow. Taking what you need, maybe staying in one posture over the other for a full round of breath. And then when you're ready, finding stillness in your cat-cow, I invite you to extend your right leg out behind you, straight back. Again, maybe pointing and flexing your foot or rotating your ankle. Maybe even peeking over your right shoulder, getting a little side body stretch in. Before taking a long inhale, stretching your right leg back, then bending your right knee, drawing your right knee in through your chest, stepping your right foot forward, landing your foot on the outside of your right hand, coming into just a really gentle lizard pose. So nothing too intense. This is our first lizard pose. Noticing what you notice in your left hip. Making any adjustments with your knee if you need to draw it closer to you to modify the intensity of the stretch, or if you need to wiggle it back to just deepen the stretch a little bit. Your right shoulder is hugged in against your right knee. Your hands can be on the floor or on blocks. Your gaze can be down. Just noticing, taking inventory, breathing. And then when you're ready, beginning to come back onto your left knee, sweeping your right leg back, coming back into three-legged table, extending your right leg behind you, taking a long stretch, and then returning your right knee to the earth. sinking your hips back towards your heels, coming into a puppy dog pose. Allow your arms to stretch out long in front of you. Maybe even bringing your forehead to the mat. Pausing here to breathe. Coming back up to hands and knees. Maybe taking a full round of cat and cow. If you're feeling the need for a little more breath and movement in your practice, before setting up for that stretch on the opposite side. So extending your left leg long behind you, pointing and flexing your foot, stretching, maybe peeking over your left shoulder for a side body stretch. Before engaging your core, drawing your belly button to your spine, drawing your left knee in, through, stepping your left foot out next to your left hand, and setting up for lizard pose on the opposite side. Pausing here, breathing. Noticing if any feelings are coming up for you. You'll often hear in a yoga class, like your emotions are stored in your hips. And sometimes when we do hip openers, you might feel like waves of anger, waves of sadness, waves of something. When we feel intense emotions or stress, as you know, we often hold tension in our bodies. So we might furrow our brow, or our breathing becomes restricted, or we might clench our fists or clench our jaw. We also tighten our hips. Our hips, like when we tighten in an emotional reaction, they send us into fight or flight, so we can be ready to run or escape, or even go into the fetal position, which is a grounding safety pose. So when we say our emotions are stored in our hips, our body, our muscle memory knows that when we have tense hips, there's some kind of emotional thing going on. And if we don't do anything to release that tension, it kind of becomes, our hips become our emotional junk drawer. So we have to do these hip openers to kind of release that emotional energy that, our body keeps the score with. So when you're ready, go ahead and sweep your left leg back, slowly releasing it, stretching it back before drawing your left knee back to meet your right, sinking your hips towards your heels, coming back into that puppy dog pose. Taking a few moments to breathe here, maybe flipping your palms open to the sky. And then when you're ready, begin to rise. We'll meet back in hands and knees. Option to take a round or two of cat and cow to just add some movement, loosening your low back. And then when you're ready, we'll find stillness and continue to meet in hands and knees. So this time, extend your right leg long behind you, three-legged table. Begin to draw your right knee in through your chest, stepping your right foot out to the outside of your right hand, coming into lizard pose once again. This time I invite you, we're going to begin to add a little bit of movement to this pose. So on your in-breath, you're going to begin to lift your hips, sending your hips back towards your left heel, popping your right foot up, drawing your right leg straight, so coming into a hamstring stretch, and then exhaling, stretching your hamstring. And then let's inhale, drawing forward, coming into lizard. Exhale, releasing. Coming back here for a round of breath. And then on your next inhale, begin to rise, sending your hips back towards your heel. Exhaling, coming into a hamstring stretch or half splits posture. And playing with your hands, maybe even stretching your hands forward like you do in child's pose or puppy dog pose. Noticing your breath. And then when you're ready, begin to walk your hands forward, coming back into a lizard pose. Take an inhale and then exhale, sending your right leg long behind you, three-legged table. And return your right knee to meet your left, coming back into hands and knees. If you need to, if we've been on our wrists for a moment, you can pause to take a moment just to kind of stretch your wrists by extending your arm long and peeling your fingers back. Or just rotating, just taking a moment, giving your wrists a break if needed. Otherwise, we'll prepare to set up on the opposite side, extending your left leg long, three-legged table. Take an inhale, begin to draw your left knee in through your chest, stepping your left foot on the outside of your left hands, exhaling, releasing into lizard pose. Take an inhale. And then exhale, begin to sink your hips back towards your right heel, popping your left toes up, straightening your left leg. Exhale, release into half splits or this intense hamstring stretch. Breathing here. Noticing what comes up for you. Just like we did with the scripture, noticing if there's any feelings. You can name the feeling. And just be present with it, knowing that emotions, negative or positive, are temporary. Any suffering or pain is temporary. Inhale, begin to come forward, back into lizard pose. Stay here for a round of breath. Noticing if anything is changing for you as we've been warming up our hips and stretching. Noticing if you can lengthen your stretch at all, or if it just feels less painful. And get ready. Take this hamstring stretch one more time, sending our hips back to our right heel, popping our left toes up, and maybe stretching our arms out in front of us. Maybe even shaking our head out, yes and no, releasing any tension. And inhale, coming back to lizard pose. Pausing here for a moment, pressing into your hands. On an inhale, sweeping your left leg straight back behind you, coming into three-legged table. Before returning your left knee to meet your right. Bring your toes together, knees wide, sink your hips back, come all the way into a child's pose, allowing your forehead to come to the mat. Maybe bringing your hands together above your head in prayer pose. Taking a moment to just check in. And then when you're ready, begin to rise. coming up to a seated pose on your mat. So staff pose, your legs are extended out in front of you. Again, pulling any flesh away from your sits bones. Sitting tall, rounding your shoulders on your back, feeling like maybe there's a string drawing from the crown of your head to the ceiling, allowing you to sit long. Breathing here, inhaling your arms to the sky, exhaling, reaching forward. Hamstring stretch with both legs this time. Just noticing what you notice. When you're ready, inhale, begin to slowly inhale your arms to the sky. Exhale, release your arms. Next, I invite you can keep your left leg extended right where it is. I invite you to begin to bring a bend to your right knee and place your right knee into your right elbow. And then begin to use both hands to pick your leg up. Place your right foot in the crook of your arm, so bending, so the sole of your foot is in your left elbow, so like you're holding a baby, like literally called like rock the baby pose. So we are, again, just first noticing the stretch, and if this is too intense for you, you can always just take that posture and stretch, returning your leg to the earth or coming into that supine reclined pigeon pose that we had at the beginning, or we used at the beginning of class. So if you are in the rock the baby pose, again, inviting you to sit tall, lifting your heart, keeping your left foot active by flexing your foot, keeping your right foot flexed, and begin to just gently breathe and rock the baby. So you're just literally making some really small movements with your hips. So pressing your right knee towards your right elbow, your right foot into your left elbow, and you're gently rocking. Again, when we talk about range of motion in our hips, this is just a really slight, gentle movement. So you're not like, again, thinking you're gonna like toss the baby into the next room. You're just gently rocking, slowly opening and breathing. And then when you're ready, find stillness. Again, just as gently as you got into the pose, begin to lift your leg out of your hands, out of your elbows, returning your right leg to meet your left, maybe shaking your legs out, and then setting up to do all that on the opposite side. So this time you're extending your right leg long, bringing a bend to your left knee, placing your left knee inside your left elbow, using both hands to draw the sole of your right foot into your right elbow. And again, be mindful of your low back. If this is too intense for you, again, I invite you to take the stretch by just placing your leg on the ground with the sole of your left foot on your inner thigh. Again, just gently rocking the baby. Noticing if this side feels any different and noticing where it feels different. Remembering to keep your core engaged and sit tall. And then when you're ready, gently release the pose, slowly returning, straightening your leg, unwinding it, returning your left leg to meet your right, maybe coming onto your hands and just windshield wipering your knees from side to side if that feels good. And then finding stillness and getting ready to prepare for
our fire log pose. So this is where I invite you to have any props handy if you'd like. I'm going to show you different options. And again, if this was really intense for you to do on the wall or on, you know, the furniture or the flat surface, I would invite you to come to either a modified version of this or, again, going back to the reclined pigeon pose. Otherwise, to begin, we are going to, just like we did on the wall, use bringing our front leg, so our left leg, we're flexing our left foot, and we're bringing our shin parallel to the edge of our mat. And then option to place a block in front of you if needed. Bringing a bend to your right knee. I invite you to gently place your right ankle just above your left knee. So coming into this double pigeon or fire log pose, because again, it looks like we're sitting at a fire log, enjoying the campfire. It's 4th of July weekend. Hopefully you're doing something relaxing and rewarding and restorative. And again, another option for props. So this is where you can, if your knee is really high, you can place a block in between, the gap between your foot and your knee. That might be one way to use the prop. Another option, if this is really too intense for you, you can use the prop as an extension of your left leg. So maybe placing your right ankle on the block in front of your left knee rather than towards you. But again, key is keeping this top foot flexed and active, lifting your heart. If you have any space between your foot and your knee, the goal here is softening into the pose, so sitting tall. There's always an option to come forward. I don't recommend you deepening that part of the pose or using that until you are secure in, like, your hips are flexed and open. So this would be if you're like hyper flexible in your hips, or you've been doing this pose for a long time and you have a lot of bandwidth, deepening the stretch by drawing your heart forward. But otherwise, if you're like me and you have some hip work to do, you're sitting tall, you're lifting your heart, and you're just breathing, softening, embracing the pose with acceptance, presence, and softness, no matter how harsh the conditions. We hold hip openers for a long time. Noticing what comes up for us. Then when you're ready, take one more long round of breath. Slowly letting your exhale simmer out before beginning to gently unwind the pose. So you're lifting your right foot off of your left leg, gently extending it out right in front of you, extending your left leg out. Again, maybe just taking a moment to shake out any tension, maybe windshield wiping your knees, just doing something kind of as a counter pose before we set up and do all that fun on the opposite side. So again, when you're ready, drawing your opposite leg, so using this time your right foot is on the bottom. And again, option to move props around as needed. Bending your left knee, placing your left ankle over the top of, so you're not placing it on your knee, above your knee. So really it's your inner thigh. And again, option to place props where they feel right for you. And breathing. Take another long, slow, intentional round of breath. Slowly letting your exhale simmer out, sighing out slowly before gently lifting your left foot off of your right leg, straightening your left leg, straightening your right leg. Let's bring our legs wide. So extending your feet towards the corner of your mat, really lengthening your legs. This should feel really good after all these deep bends and hip openers we've done. Inhale your arms to the sky. Exhale, draw your heart forward, letting your hands land wherever they land. The goal is not to extend here, but just to feel a deep stretch across your inner thighs, keeping both feet flexed. And remembering to breathe. And then when you're ready, begin to walk your hands back up to a seated pose, drawing your spine long, sitting tall, bringing your legs together, and then coming all the way onto your back, just like we did at the beginning of practice. So finding that posture we did at the beginning of practice, I invite you to bring, if you still need any hip openers, I invite you to bring the soles of your feet together and knees wide, coming into reclined bound angle, if that is calling to you. Otherwise, if you need your legs to be extended, I invite you to just let them be long. Maybe letting each foot come to opposite sides of the mat. Pausing here for a moment. Bringing back to mind God's presence. I'm going to read our passage a final time before spending a few moments in silent prayer. And again, noticing any emotions, feelings that come up for you, feelings for others, feelings for Jesus, and simply sending those off into prayer, speaking what's on your heart directly to Jesus. Jesus departed from there and came to his native place, accompanied by his disciples. When the Sabbath came, he began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were astonished. They said, "Where did this man get all this? What kind of wisdom has been given him? What mighty deeds are wrought by his hands? Is he not the carpenter, the son of Mary, and the brother of James and Joseph and Judas and Simon? And are not his sisters here with us?" And they took offense at him. Jesus said to them, "A prophet is not without honor except in his native place, and among his own kin, and in his own house." So he was not able to perform any mighty deed there, apart from curing a few sick people by laying his hands on them. He was amazed by their lack of faith. Spend a few moments of silence in prayer with God now. Allow your awareness to return back to your breath. Taking a slow inhale in through your nose. Slowly sighing out your exhale. Maybe making small movements with your fingers and toes. Maybe taking one more stretch, whether hugging your knees into your chest or taking a full body stretch by reaching your hands up overhead. When you're ready, make your way onto whichever side is calling to you. Maybe curling up in the fetal pose, being mindful of your hips. Savoring a few more moments in God's loving embrace during this practice. And then when you're ready, slowly make your way up to a seated position on the mat. Your eyes can be closed and your gaze can be down. Your hands are at heart center. We raise our hands to our forehead. May God's word be on our minds. We lower our hands to our lips. May God's word be on our lips. And we return our hands to heart center. May God's word remain in our hearts. We bow to our God and one another as we say, Namaste.